Thanks everyone for coming down and finding your way over to this little corner of the hotel. Really appreciate you coming to our session. Today we're going to talk about AI and specifically like ethical AI and putting guardrails around AI, but then also like creating things that are going to be really helpful for you and your teammates that may be at different parts of their journey, the AI journey. Can I get a show of hands? Who uses AI at least once a day? Cool. Awesome. Interesting. That gives us a good idea.
Every other day.
Yeah, exactly. Often enough, right? So just to explain the format, we're going to spend about 15 minutes. Alex Morgan and I are going to talk for about 15 minutes just about this ethical framework. You're going to break into teams of 4, and we're going to have a competition. There's 3 scenarios, and honestly, this is more about the art form than the actual outputs, because you're going to have one computer and there's going to be a lot of you. But just talking through how you would approach it, maybe test out some prompts, and try to figure out like how do you analyze this data, sharing ideas about how you can approach AI prompting. So anyway, before we get started, this is really important. If you don't know this guy, Geoffrey Hinton just won the Nobel Prize last year. He is considered one of the godfathers of AI. And I love this quote so much. I'm going to read it to you just because it's so powerful, right? We are creating systems that can think faster than us, they're smarter than us, and we don't fully understand how they can work. And that's a dangerous place to be. And it's less about, okay, these AI is going to take over the world, right, and turn into Terminator. And it's more, okay, how do we responsibly use AI, put guardrails around it so that we can use it effectively and make our lives better, right? And anyway, to give you a little background on us, my name's Alex Tuck. This is Alex Morgan. We only hire Alexes at my company. And we do project management for small businesses and nonprofits. Nonprofits are a big part of the work that we do. And we're top 5 ClickUp implementers in the world, number 1 in nonprofit. And yeah, I'm based in Underhill, using Colchester. Yeah, and we're just really excited. We're also very passionate about AI. And we wanted to have a session because we didn't see any other sessions that were submitted around AI. We typically help organizations work through AI frameworks, right? So we do the project management for them adopting AI across their organization. So let's talk about ethics of AI, right? And these are just examples, right? And this is something that drives the work that we do within our organization. But honestly, there are tons of ethical frameworks out there. If you Google it, you can find the ones that make the most sense for you and your organization, or even you as an individual, right? But they should always enhance humans, right? They should not replace humans. And so when we're thinking about AI, let's think about how do we take away the monotonous work, the stuff that we don't get excited to jump out of bed and do, right? And how do we use it to enhance the work that we're doing? So that's one. Number 2 is that you should always have a human in the loop, right? You should always have human oversight. So when you have an AI model, you can trust it to some extent, but you still want to make sure that humans are driving the work that's being done. The third thing is that you should be transparent about how we're using AI. As I was pulling together these slides, I'm like, we should just put, okay, this blog that we wrote was enhanced with AI. Like just being more transparent about like how you're using AI, what models you're using, what is created by a human, what's not created by a human is really important, because then you can understand like how much you should trust it and how much you shouldn't. And then obviously, data privacy is a huge thing, especially in the work that we do. There are a lot of beneficiaries, people receiving services, and you don't want to just throw all of their information into an AI model out there. Or you want to make sure that it's air gapped from the internet if you're going to do that internally. So anyway, those are the ethics. Thinking about acceptable use, okay? So I think most of the people in the room, especially if you're like part of a bigger organization, you probably have some form of IT acceptable use policy. I'm not going to use my work computer to do blah, 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 personal, all these different things. I'm going to make sure that I have antivirus on my phone if I'm going to use work there. But one thing that a lot of companies have not implemented is putting generative AI acceptable use policies in place. And so some people want to bake it in. We actually baked it into our overall acceptable use policy because it made sense. We have a whole section on generative AI, but specifically like what LLMs, large language models, can you use ChatGPT, can you use Claude, can you use these different things, which ones are allowed, and which apps have AI in it, and which ones of those are allowed, and which ones are absolutely not allowed. So that's like table stakes, make sure that you tell your entire organization that this is in, this is out, because if you don't, guess what? Everyone's just going to go and use the free version and throw all sorts of crazy stuff into the internet. Oh yes, ma'am.
How do you get that call over one versus the other, or?
Oh, good question.
Besides just continuity.
So we have a couple, like if you go to our AI page, there's actually, it's geared towards project managers, but it can really be used for across the board. There are better models for different things, and it's really important you can just go and spend a lot of money on a lot of different tools, and it is important to test drive, be creative, and have a group internally that's driving that. That's our recommendation, is to do that, and then once you test it, then you can roll it across the entire organization. But that would be my recommendation, is just figure out which models make the most sense.
By building the policy, you're building the process of, hey, you need to ask permission if you're going to use this tool. Everything we're using is sucking up our data, and if personal concerns aside, if you have sensitive business information, I don't think anybody reads the policies here, so you don't know where that data is going. Try to constrain it as much as you can, at least that's the first step. And really just the analysis of what tool is best for what outcome is, there's no easy way to say it, or easy way to say what's what, but there are so many tools coming out that you really have to have a change management policy to say what should be approved or should we consider this, and just recognizing that if there's a tool that's adding AI features to it, like everything under the sun these days, either you're going to use them and there are associated costs with them, or you're not going to use them. It's partly about the overall behavior of your team, and partly about keeping your data constrained and segmented, and also just about knowing where your information lives as a process. If you have 5 different tools and they're all using AI features, where do you go to find anything? And some tools can do a better job of pulling it out of thin air than others, but constraining it at the beginning is really important. It's going to help make that a lot more manageable for everybody.
Yeah, and you can use AI to look through all the terms and conditions and tell you which ones are good or bad. Okay, the other thing is like assigning categories. So, okay, you should use Claude, Sonnet, blah, 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 blah for a marketing use case, right? Helping you frame like a marketing brief, right? So that you can then create real content with humans, right? Something like that. So just explaining to your team, okay, here's how you can use it, and these are the best use cases for it, and here's how you can't use it. So just defining like what different categories of data and use cases and sensitivity is involved is really good in the acceptable use policies. And also, this is a gotcha for a lot of people. Most folks don't know that AI stuff is getting rolled out. There's checkboxes in there that you can just go and uncheck where it doesn't feed data into those models, especially those cloud-based ones. So just have someone in your organization, if you are rolling out AI or using tools, make sure that someone's keeping an eye on that. And then this is important, I won't spend a lot of time on this, but creating a culture of curiosity it's the best part about it. Like our team adopts AI probably more than any other team that we interact with in the professional services space, because Alex is just building agents after agents, so am I, so are our other teammates, and we're just constantly, with the tools that are approved, right, trying to like figure out, okay, how can we stop the boring stuff? How can we prevent the errors from occurring? Those kinds of things. And then how can we apply it? And so these are some examples of how to do this.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, there's a lot of best practices you can see about prompt engineering, and people have been doing this for years now. So there's some basic elements. You're going to include instructions, and I think a lot of common mentality is to phrase it as if the AI is alive, personify it, and say your job is X or your role is X. I think it helps us understand what we're trying to do. We're not trying to say to this task, here's the outcome. We're trying to give guardrails in a broad sense to say, here's the general responsibility or thing we're trying to use you for, and here are some constraints. And then starting more broad-based and vague and getting it more precise by testing and refining it, finding out, hey, this didn't work the way I thought, over and over again. The first part is really just from that perspective of phrasing the instruction, the task in context, and identifying those constraints is key, because that's ultimately what's going to drive the output. Being as precise as possible for your own sake to read it, because one, you're going to need to read it multiple times to change it, to fix it. So writing in a big block of text like I like to do is really hard to work with. Use bulleted lists, things like that. Just organize structurally for your own maintenance. And from a perspective of, hey, you want to say this one bullet point of a requirement was not conveyed properly. If it's broken out, it's easy to say this is the thing I need to add more specifics to. The second part, really, the inputs, the more you can, input and output-wise, the more you can drive the shape of what you wanted to build from a formatting design perspective, the better. So saying things like, here is the reference document that I need this to look like, or here is the structure of the output, whether it's simple text, make it a bulleted list, make it a paragraph. That's kind of basic stuff, but the more, again, specific, precise you can make that reference and say, here is an exact copy of the doc I want, and what I want it to look like, fill in these blanks. They're really good about that kind of vague approximation if you can give it that reference point. And again, you can hone it closer and closer to what that reference point looks like. And then lastly, there are obviously lots of various case studies, in addition to just the design reference, but something like, here is the structure, the tone I want to copy, or here's a good example of an output, here's a bad example of an output, giving the constraints on both ends to say, here's what I don't and do want it to look like, works very well to get it closer and closer to your ultimate goal. Those are helpful, and you can find, hey, this worked or didn't work as closely as I want, but it's gonna boil down more to the words you're saying and the instruction aspect of, hey, this didn't convey properly in terms of a format, or this didn't convey properly in terms of requirements. The thing I like to complain about is when I say something like, do X, and there's obviously and it has to include this, and it doesn't seem to recognize that as a has to. So the more, again, pedantic and annoying you can write the instructions to some degree, the easier it is to wriggle out why this is messing up. And that's, the output I just mentioned. For simple cases, so here's an example we've actually used internally. We have interviews with our project managers at the end of an engagement. There's a regular Zoom call or team call where we have a few specific questions, and then we take the transcript and say, this is the structure of the transcript, this is the structure of, these are the types of questions we're asking. We would like to turn this into a case study for that client based on what the interviewee said. And if we can, essentially, if they answer the questions properly, we can get the output look exactly the way we want it, with a single transcript and one prompt, no additional work except for putting it on WordPress, which takes 10 times longer than everything else. It's text-based, so you can be very simple. You can use a basic doc. You can use code or other things to make colored outputs. Or in similar cases, we've used the links we had in the previous slide. Here are some of our favorite case studies that we've done. Here are the examples of data we're pulling out of a conversation. So not just what the outputs look like and what the inputs could look like, but connecting the dots. So for example, we have an interview question. We're trying to get metrics for a case study to say something like, we improved your business performance by 20% or something big like that. Having a metric or having an example of, here's an example of actual number that we referenced in the text, and we can show that change, rather than just saying, find some numbers for us or find some percentages that somebody mentioned. Making it more specific with the actual type of example we're using with multiple case studies really helps to help us get the output we want, and building it into the prompts makes it much more automatic. Obviously, some of the more annoying things like that, if you're getting bad input, you're gonna get bad output. So in this case, we took a lot of massaging of the initial interview, making sure we're asking questions in a certain way, behaviorally during those interviews, saying things like, here is a flag for the transcript that's unnatural, but we're doing in these cases. You can make it much more structured in your agendas or in your interview questions, and then given the output, ultimately just refining to get from the first part into the actual visually polished representation.
Yeah, and this example, we went from something that took 8 to 10 hours to produce a single case study, and it would take 4 to 6 weeks because we were constantly handing off. It takes us like probably an hour and a half total, including everyone's time, and we get it done in a week now.
And in these cases, just to point out some examples, in terms of like the specificity can be key. The more specific you are, ideally, the more specific your outputs are going to be. But in case, write a 200-word summary. 200 words, it's going to be pretty good about sticking to the numbers. Give me a bullet with 5 bullets that are 2 sentences each. That you can massage the format and the output in multiple ways with that. And then down here, giving, I would say they've been pretty bad about things like just selecting from multiple choices like that, but if you break it, in some cases at least, if you break it down easily and give discrete options, it makes it pretty simple, and you can, again, easily QA it afterwards. Hey, this is not one of the choices I gave. How did that come about? Hallucinations and stuff are another big topic that we'll probably talk about in a minute, but removing those obstacles really starts with the clarity of the input. So, elements of a great prompt, and these are partly our best practices and partly everyone's best practices. It's almost always iterating and refining what you're building, because unless you're some mastermind that really just speaks robot perfectly, what you write naturally is they're trying to translate how we speak into how machines think. So you're going to have hurdles, of course. In my opinion, like I just said, trying to be a little more robotic about the structure of it helps, at least me, just from the QA perspective. Because again, reading through a big paragraph and saying, well, where did I say that part about giving me 3 to 5 sentences? That can be a little easier to pull out. But you you're doing the first try, I would say start small, both in terms of the component you're trying to build. So in the case study example, we didn't just say, here's a transcript for a case study, give us a case study. We said, here is a transcript for an interview, can you extract 3 key points? And obviously that's like an easy one because they can all do that now. But starting smaller, building on top of whatever we're trying to pull out of it, and then making sure it's continuously polished as we add either things we're trying to add, as we add inputs to it, or as we try to extract more out of it. So frankly, I would say start as small as you can with a reasonable kind of functional output that's going to be useful to you, and then see what the outcome is. If it's exactly what you want, great, add more to it. And then really work iteratively, line by line, or at least output your piece by piece as much as you can. If you start to find, hey, I didn't do the 3 things I added, then roll it back and try one instead. Do you have a question?
When you say feed it source, do you give a link to the thing? Or do you say in MLA style? How do you?
All the above.
Yeah. You could certainly do, if it's something specific and you really want to be clear that it's going to hit those requirements, being as specific as possible, I would give it a direct link to the MLA guidelines, or even upload a PDF. Things like, depends on the tool you're using, but the more exact it can be, either including it, like I said, for instance, you could say, give me a bulleted list, or you could give an example of a bulleted list that looks the way you want, and that's gonna give you much closer to what you're trying to get. These cases, the source data we're talking about in general are both design references, formatting wise, so like style guides. We've used this internally we give our examples of our own case studies, so that's a general vibe reference, and then our style guides, fonts, colors, things like that. Those work very well as well. And then other types of source data would really be references.
Are you going to do a demo so we can see?
Yeah, we're gonna do it together. Yes.
Do you have recommendations for an AI tool to use? Somebody out there?
Yeah.
Copilot,
Yes.
Grammarly, which would you recommend?
Okay, that's a hard one. I would say my political answer is no. Because there are 4 huge ones and they're all a little bit different. Frankly, the key for us has been just doing it. Just actually trying to use it on a daily or semi-daily basis, being curious, knowing it doesn't work very well most of the time or a lot of the time, and getting better and better at it. It depends on your use case. But really, for us, it's try using it. If you use one and it works well for you, then you'll get better and better at how that tool specifically works. They all work pretty similar, so there's big differences, and I'm sure people will compare them. But ultimately, for most business applications, going into it is pretty much the same again, different colors and fonts. But you can pretty clearly see, and we'll have it in the demo here, you put in the same prompt with 2 different tools and you get 3 different, very different looking outputs. So one of the tools we like to push as a partner and as a user is ClickUp. It's a work management software that includes AI functionality and has its own model of sorts. It's really just based on GPT, but you can use the default ClickUp model of AI, or you can just use Gemini, Claude, or base ChatGPT 5.0 or 4.0. So you can, in the same tool, say, hey, I want to see this version's output or this version's output, or I'm going to be writing something that's poetic, so I want to use something that's a little more human sounding, or I want to code, so I'm going to use Gemini in that case. It's all very arbitrary, but honestly, play with one, see how you like it. If you don't like it, there's another one out there. This is, for our case, building a prompt and agent library. The ultimate kind of use case that we've established here was we're using AI a lot. We're a consulting firm, so we have lots of different clients that have different business models and their own types of operations. So our own kind of agents or things we do with AI can be very different than our clients, and really there's not a lot of one size fits all. But there are plenty of cases where we need to do the same function repeatedly, and that's the premise of you having a library for it. You can save your prompts in a lot of tools. There's built-in save XYZ. You can also just have a notepad or whatever you want to do to write down things like that. But functionally, having the information stored somewhere is the most important part, whether that's built into the tool or somewhere else, both for your own sake to have that in writing somewhere, you can go find it easily, and for the rest of your team to see, for example, what have you been doing with this? What is the prompt you can use that I can then take and make my own or use my own purpose? And giving people the ideas or how these tools can be used, how they are being used effectively. And frankly, if you're making a database or a library, you'll have a bunch that don't work, and it'll be pretty clear, oh, I've tried that already, it's not working right now, let me go back to it. In our case, we're working closely with some other partners that have similar libraries, so we stole some ideas in terms of what they like to capture, but for the most part, it's pretty straightforward. What I would include first is just building one, in the sense having a place that this exists, something where you can say we keep all of our AI prompts or our artifacts, whatever we're trying to work on as a team here, so that everyone knows what to go look for. Did somebody already do this somewhere? It already made a case study generator that I don't need to rebuild. If you know where those things would live, then you can obviously go find them or see what exists. and communicating that is secondary. Labeling the prompts, and basically how we've structured it, we can show you in a bit. It's really just a table, a spreadsheet. It is a name of what the prompt is supposed to do, the use case or the agent, just describing it easily. The actual prompt text that you can copy and paste into a tool with as much literal as-built version as possible. Not trying to say, here is a generic thing that I can use and fill in the blanks, but say, here is actually one I made that is doing a specific thing, so that you can see exactly how it should work, or if it suddenly doesn't work, what's going on. That description, that text, making the actual prompt text available is really helpful, because otherwise somebody has to do the work to turn the idea into text, and that's most of the work here. Next, use cases and what kind of, not specifically what you are using it for right now, sorry, not only that, but what you envision it could be used for in general. I think that's helpful for the rest of a team to say, we're making case studies, but maybe you're trying to make blog posts. It's the same idea, you just, a different format, a different tone, things like that. Who made it, so you can talk to them about it. And then status, for our case, because these are always very iterative, and we at least are constantly finding, hey, this worked really well, and then we're continuing to use it, but it's already being changed. This thing hasn't worked for not 2 years probably, but this thing didn't work 6 months ago and I haven't gotten back to it. So a status tracker, say this thing is in testing or it's been sufficiently tested, we know it works, we can use it as is. Just keeping track of that, because you're not gonna have, probably not at least gonna work on one thing until it's perfect and then move on to the next. If you do that, power to you, you'll have a great library. If not, track your statuses. Lastly, the style guide and template. So to the same point we said before about a design reference or an output for the format. Your own style guide, whether that's for your own, like our case, branding guidelines, things that you would want to be using universally, having that accessible for everybody to just have a central repository. Here are the various tools you might want to, or artifacts you might want to use going forward. And then for the actual, you can include some of those things like the formatting design in the prompt library, not just what the prompt text should be, but here is an example of the reference article or the thing I'm ultimately going to look towards.
Quick question.
Sure.
Because my assumption is that you're expecting that people are using the paid version of
Yes.
this, and that if they are using the paid version, then they're using maybe the corporate version of it, when maybe in Vermont, most nonprofits are 5 people or less.
Yeah.
So where is the value? I mean, I'm guessing most people do not have more than a staff of 5, 10 people.
Sure.
So who's buying a corporate license for ChatGPT?
Yeah, great question. We're a small biz too, and so like our core operations team is only 5, and buying those licenses, they're really inexpensive, even for nonprofits. If you're talking about $10-20 per license, and so it can be really affordable. Especially a lot of them are already built. AI is already built into some of the apps you're already using. When you go in and use the AI within ClickUp, you can actually access all the different things. So you can use GPT models, any of the mini models, Claude, all the Claude models, and the Gemini models, all built into that one tool. So I think it's just about finding the right tool that has what you need, right? You're probably already paying for some licenses already, whether it's your CRM or a project management tool. But it's still an investment for sure.
So what's ClickUp? Is that another?
It's just that it's a project management, work management tool. But it's got AI built into it, and so they have licensing around that. Sure, go for it.
It's the same question.
Yeah.
It's cheaper than a Microsoft license for the year. If you're,
Yeah.
for example, if I was a small business, as a personal user, I've never paid Microsoft to use Office in my life. I can find free versions of that. If I had to pick what I would spend $30 on a month between Word, the official version, and AI that could help write the stuff that I can then finish in a free version or in Google Sheets, that's obviously just an allocation. There are examples where they're really expensive, and I would say like the Pro model, that's $200 a month. I don't know who's using that, not many people, even the crazy AI people aren't using it so much. But you can do incredible things for that, hypothetically. Not to say it's worth $200 a month. That's a hard sell for most folks. For some of these, they're $10, $15 per user per month, so again, a small business, $1,000 a year. If it's actually, the value proposition for us is it's actually saving you time, then it's worth $1,000 in a heartbeat. That's it. To get to a time-saving point, you need to invest your own time first and set up the prompts, or somebody can do that. You don't need the paid versions to get to that point though. So you can certainly, it's slower, you can certainly use multiple free versions of the tools. The premise here is just having that repeatable thing you could use AI for, which again, if you're not gonna pay for it, then maybe it's not as valuable. But you could still have a series of things you can only do with free versions and get value out of them. Like this case study generator example, you can use that in the free ChatGPT, you can upload a file, you can only do one a day. So if you have more than one case study to write a day, you would want to pay for it, but you can do that for free right now.
Did you say you can control your data through the free and the paid version?
99% of the time you have to do the paid version to control the data. But it just depends, as a nonprofit, right? Like most of your stuff is public anyway, right? You wouldn't want to put any of your client data in there.
That's a different cost. Too.
Yeah, whole different cost, whole different thing.